I've played Magic for a few years now. When I started playing Magic, I played 60 card formats like Pioneer and Standard. And when I did play those formats, my decks of choice was always mono green Stompy or mono red aggro or mono red goblin. The aggro and goblin part has carried over into Commander as well, but one thing that kind of got left behind was mono green, and I've always wanted to build a mono green Commander deck. Right now, the only deck I have with green in it is my competitive Kinnan deck, which it's not something that me back when I started playing Magic would have enjoyed, I think. So I decided that I wanted to build a mono green Stompy deck that I could give to myself if I went back in time, and that version of me would enjoy that deck. This deck has gone through a lot of iterations. To start with, I used Questing Beast because that was like the creature commander in mono green, and I looked at EDH and it was super popular, and I've always loved Questing Beast and all the things Questing Beast does. It's just that turned the deck more into a Voltron deck, and it was more about getting hits in with Questing Beast, and so that wasn't really what I wanted. That wouldn't be the deck that me back when I started would have enjoyed the same way. And so I found Kona during Duskmourn, and Kona was great because it allowed me to put huge creatures onto the battlefield for cheap. Like, I could cheat out some massive green stompy creatures. The problem though was that this was also a bit too Voltron themed because it was all about having to tap Kona so that on the Kona trigger you could put something out, which meant that I had to have a ton of effects that would allow me to tap Kona or protect Kona as it's declared as an attacker. And so that was also not exactly what I wanted. And for a while I had kind of just forgotten about this because I couldn't really find a creature that I vied with until a friend of mine, Jet Cheap, you might know him, you might not, he gave me a Loot Exuberant Explorer as a payment for helping him build a deck of his, and Loot was perfect. Loot allowed me to just fill the deck with a ton of cool creatures. It allows for some sub-themes within the deck around those creatures that I couldn't with all the others. There's no need for it to be a Voltron theme at all because Loot will never attack. You just do the ramping part so that you can tap Loot, do some activations, and get some creatures out for free. Well, for free, it's still the price of the activation, but still. And so I went through all my green cards that hadn't been touched for years because I had no deck they would go in. I had no deck that they fit in really thematically or color-wise as well, because like I said, the only green deck I had was Kinnan, and Kinnan is very restrictive on what creatures I want, even though it is big flips. Going through all of that, I found so many cool creatures that I'd forgotten about, and also a ton of cool creatures that I had opened in packs that I just didn't want to play before this, that didn't have a home before this, and now they do. All of these cool creatures fit perfectly in this deck. I think we should just go straight into the deck overview, and I'll show you all the cool creatures and I'll tell you where I got them, and then we'll come back and we'll do a little recap and I'll talk about how I want to upgrade and go about upgrading. So I'll see you there. Here we have it. This is the deck pretty much laid out in categories, or at least by card types. Let's start with the commander, Loot himself. Loot has kind of become the Pikachu of Magic the Gathering. It is the little cute fuzzy creature that gets reprinted every time they have a chance to do so. Loot is pretty much the mascot of Magic the Gathering at this point. This version of Loot is Loot Exuberant Explorer. For 2 and 1 green, you get a 1/4 Beast Noble that says you may play an additional land on each of your turns, and you may pay 4 and 2 green to tap Loot and look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card with mana value less than or equal to the number of lands you control from among them and put it onto the battlefield, then put the rest on the bottom in the random order. Loot is great for this deck and exactly what I wanted. Both of his abilities are perfect. The potential for landfall in the first ability and the cheating out big creatures. It gives you a randomness effect that you don't necessarily would get with other creatures. So Loot is perfect. It's exactly what I wanted. It makes every game different, and I love that. Then I think we should start with the smallest pile, which is Planeswalkers, because there is only Garruk Unleashed. And this Garruk is a Garruk I got from a duels set that I bought to get my brother into Magic. That didn't work, but I still have Garruk, and he didn't have a deck to go into, but this deck kind of works really well with Garruk. For 2 and 2 green, you get a 4 loyalty Planeswalker that says you can uptick him for 1. Up to 1 target creature gets +3/+3 and gains trample until end of turn. And you can -2 to create a 3/3 green beast, which is awesome. Pretty much in here just for the first ability. I doubt he will live long enough for me to ultimate. So that's not really something I'm thinking about at all. It's more the fact that with huge creatures, getting +3/+3 and trample on them, that is very valuable in this deck. If I'm just unlucky and all I have is mana dorks, having 3/3 and trample on a mana dork is also pretty viable. So Garruk is a great support piece, and very thematic. He's like the mono green planeswalker, so that's why we have Garruk. Next up is Heroic Intervention, which is also a great card for a deck that tends to be targeted quite a bit because of all the creatures. So for 1 and 1 green, you get an instant that gives all your permanents indestructible and hexproof until end of turn. So board wipes, for example, this will protect you and help you live a little bit longer. I opened this in my Fallout opening, so if you're interested in that, go ahead and have a look at my channel and you'll find it. Then we have Sprouting Vines, which I opened from the Scourge opening, so again, if you want to see that, check my channel, there's a video on that there. This is a very interesting one because for 2 and 1 green, you get an instant that allows you to search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. But it also has Storm, so if someone's about to pop off and you're low on land, remember that loot lets you play an additional each turn, so the landfall potential is quite huge. Having this there to just help you get those land drops, very valuable, especially because sometimes you get stuck with massive creatures in your hand. Having those extra lands available, very helpful. Next up is Sorceries. These Sorceries are pretty much just like support items for the deck. It is kind of necessary when the deck is built around massive creatures to have some stuff helping you around that. To start with, we have Nature's Lore for 1 and 1 green. You get a sorcery that says, search your library for a forest card, put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Then we have a weird card I opened in my Bloomber opening. So again, if you want to see that, go check my channel. I swear I'll stop shouting out my old videos now. We have Season of Gathering with an amazing art. I love this so much. For 4 and 2 green, you get a sorcery that has a paw print modal on it. So you get to choose up to 5 paw prints worth of modes, and you can choose the same mode more than once. The first mode is for 1 paw print, you can put a +1 counter on a creature you control, and it gains vigilance and trample until end of turn. You could do that once on 5 creatures, or you could do that 5 times on 1 creature. That's up to you. But you could also do 2 paw prints, choose artifact or enchantment, destroy all permanents of the chosen type. This is somewhat a anti-hate piece, because there are a few artifacts that would make loot unable to tap or do anything, so having this there to help out is quite valuable, and this only being 2 paw prints means that you have 3 available to do other stuff as well. The last one is for 3 paw prints, you may draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. This can be massive in here because there is a creature that we will get to in here that can get up to 42. That's at least my personal best with it, but it can get even crazier, so that can draw you a ton of cards. Next one is a little bit of recursion. Regrowth, 1 and 1 green, return target card from your graveyard to your hand. There's no massive target in this deck really. This is really just like if you have a creature that ends up being destroyed or countered, you get another chance pretty much. And then we have some more land support. Cultivate for 2 and 1 green. You may search your library for 2 basic land cards, reveal them, put one onto the battlefield and the other into your hand, then shuffle. And with loot, this is a potential 2 land drop card, so very good for landfall, which there is a few creatures that care about. Next up is Enchantment. First up is Elemental Bond for 2 and 1 green. You get whenever a creature with power 3 or greater enters under your control, draw a card, which will happen quite a bit in mono green and especially in a deck themed around huge creatures. So this drew me a lot of cards last time I played this. And then we have One with Nature for 1 green. You can enchanting creature. Whenever enchanted creature deals combat damage to a player, you may search your library for a basic land card, put that into play tapped, then shuffle. Then we have Dragon Fangs for 1 and 1 green. Enchanted creature gets +1 and has trample, and whenever a creature with converted mana cost 6 or more comes into play, you may return Dragon Fangs from your graveyard to play enchanting that creature. So if you have a creature enchanted by this and it died, it goes into the graveyard, but if you get another huge creature in, this can come in enchanting that, making that even better. So that's why we have that. Of course, we have Garruk's Uprising for 2 and 1 green. For 2 and 1 green, whenever Garruk Uprising enters the battlefield, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. Creatures you control have trample. Whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. Then we have Fertile Ground for 1 and 1 green. You can enchant a land, and whenever that land is tapped for mana, its controller adds 1 additional mana of any color. So you can make a forest tap for 2 green instead. Then we have Upwelling for 3 and 1 green. Mana pools don't empty at the end of phases or turns, so this is pretty much in here just for politics. politicking to make yourself less of a target necessarily, even though this does help you. This will also help a lot of other people out, as if they have 2 mana and they can't really cast anything, they can tap that and leave that floating without having to worry about that too much. So then we have Defense of the Heart, which I think now has become a game changer. It's on the list, I think. Defense of the Heart costs 3 and 1 green. During your upkeep, if one of your opponents control 3 or more creatures, sacrifice Defense of the Heart, search your library for up to 2 creature cards and put those creatures into play. Shuffle your library afterwards. So this is kind of a delayed tutor in a way, as most casual Commander games will have someone with at least 3 creatures, so that will definitely help you find some really strong creatures for free. And then we have the most mono green enchantment I think there ever is. I'm not planning on swinging with loot, but if I need to protect or block or something, having loot become a 10/10 giant is also pretty awesome, so that's why that is in here. I had it in this nice etched foil version, so I figured why not. Next up is artifacts, and to start up we have a Swiftfoot Boots for 2 mana and 1 mana to equip. You get a equipment that gives a creature haste and hexproof. Then we have Manifold Key for 1 mana. You get an artifact that you can pay 1 into and tap it to untap target artifact, or you can pay 3 into it and tap it to make another creature unblockable this turn. This is really good in here because some of those huge creatures would be really good to get some hits in with, and this can ensure that. But you can also pay to untap some other huge mana rocks that we will get to in a second to make even more mana as you tap it again. Then we have Emerald Medallion, just a little bit of cost reduction for 2 mana. Green spells you cast cost 1 less. This will help us cast huge creatures stuck in our hands. We have Navigation Orb for 3 mana. You can pay 2 and tap to sacrifice it to search your library for up to 2 basic land cards and or gate cards. Reveal those cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and the other into your hand. Then shuffle. So 1 goes into the battlefield, 1 goes into your hand. Pretty much the same as Cultivate, so this is the potential for a double land drop with loot. Then we have Crucible of Worlds for 3 mana. Considering how much land stuff we do with loot, just without even planning on it, I figured this was a great card to have in here, and I had this really nice foil full art Fallout version, so this allows us to play lands from our graveyard, which is really nice. We have Arcane Signet for 2 mana. You get a mana rock that taps for 1 of any color, and here we have one of those bigger mana rocks that I talked about. This is Scepter of Eternal Glory from the Necron precon. For 4 mana, you get a legendary artifact that taps for 1 of any color, or add 3 mana of any 1 color. Activate only if you control 3 or more lands with the same name, which we probably will have by the time this comes out, because this is a pile of basics. Then we have Sol Ring for 1 mana. You can tap for 2. Caged Sun is also a Necron card for 6 mana. As Caged Sun enters the battlefield, choose a color. Creatures you control of the chosen color gets +1/+1. And whenever a land's ability causes you to add 1 or more mana of the chosen color, add 1 additional mana of that color. So this makes every basic in this deck tap for 2 instead, which is awesome. Then we have Commander Sphere for 3. You can get an artifact that taps for any color in the color identity of your commander. In this case, this is green only, but that's fine. You can also sacrifice this to draw a card, and the great thing is you can tap it and then sacrifice it if you need to. At the very end, we have Mask of Memory for 2 mana. You get an equipment that costs 1 to equip. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you may draw 2 cards. If you do, discard a card. So a little bit of card draw there. Then quickly, these are our basics. These are my absolute favorite. They are from the Urza Saga, and for the most part, it is just those, but I didn't have enough to do all the lands I wanted, so there's a few regular foils as well. Then it is the other lands, and to begin with, we have Lotus Field. Lotus Field, I think, is very slept on in monocolor deck, especially in green decks that do extra stuff with lands, because even though it has hexproof and it enters tapped, and when it enters, you have to sacrifice 2 lands. When this enters, you could be all tapped out before you cast this, so you get the mana out of whatever you need to sacrifice. But this also then taps for 3 mana of any 1 color, and if you have something that allows you to get lands back, that doesn't really matter. As with loot, you can play those 2 lands right away next turn from your graveyard. And then there's a Gaia's Cradle. This is not necessary. This deck is just put together with random stuff that I had available when I was building it. This is absolutely not necessary. There's so many very budget-friendly versions that could do the same thing, like Growing Rights of Itlimoc, for example, that flips into a Gaia's Cradle, or there is a creature in here that does the same thing, which is add 1 green to your mana pool for each creature you control. This is a very powerful land, but absolutely not necessary. Finally, creatures. This is what we've all been waiting for, I think. To begin with, we have Hard Bristled Bandit for 2 and 1 green. You get a mana dork that taps for any color, and it can untap if I commit a crime. That won't happen in this deck. There's nothing really targeting anyone but myself here, so it's still a decent mana dork. Then we have Kodama of the West Tree, which I was really lucky to open in a Jumpstart pack. It is 2 and 1 green for a 3/3 spirit with reach, and it also says that modified creatures I control have trample, and that means equipment, auras, and counters count as modifications. And whenever a modified creature you control deals combat damage to a player, search your library for a basic land card and put that onto the battlefield. Tap, then shuffle. Very, very, very good in landfall themes, which is a sub-theme of this deck. And then we have the mono green legend. Even though it's not a legendary, it is Llanowar Elves. For 1 green, you get a 1/1 that taps for a green. And of course we have Steve, also known as Sakura Tribe Elder. For 1 and 1 green, you get a 1/1 Snake Shaman that can be sacrificed to search for a basic and put it onto the battlefield. And here we have one of those creatures that would trigger Kodama. It is Kurgadon. For 4 and 1 green, you get a 3/3 beast that says whenever you play a creature spell with mana cost 6 or more, put 3+1 counters on Kurgadon. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I don't think that will trigger from a loot activation because this puts it into play. This says when you play a creature, so I don't think that counters. I'm pretty sure this would have been changed in the rule texts by now. As of now, I'm playing this deck as if that wouldn't trigger, but I will have creatures in my hand that could trigger this because sometimes you do get unlucky withdrawals and you don't get them from loot. So then we have Railway Brawler for 3 and 2 green. This is also a card I opened. Rhino Warrior, 5/5, reach, trample. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, put X+1 counters on it, where X is its power. And there is a creature in here with 12 power and toughness, so that will enter as a 24/24, which is insane. And then we have one of the few hate pieces in here, which is Manglehorn. This is in here a little bit for the artifact destruction, but it is a 2/1 green 2/2 beast that says when it enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact, and artifact your opponent controls enters the battlefield tapped. Then we have a Tireless Tracker, a little bit just because it's a landfall sub-theme and I had a very pretty versions of it. So it's 2 and 1 green for a 3/2 with landfall that says whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, investigate, which means I create a clue token, and then whenever I sacrifice a clue, I can put a +1 counter on Tireless Tracker. So this is a little bit of support as well, as if I need to, I can pay a little bit of mana into a clue token, sacrifice it and draw a card, and pump Tireless Tracker up as well. And then we have one of the best protection creatures in this deck, which is Fogcrawler, also known as a Vigor. It is the fancy Fallout version because I was lucky enough to open that. For 3 and 3 green, you get a 6/6 trample elemental incarnation. If damage would be dealt to another creature you control, prevent that damage and put a +1 counter on that creature for each 1 damage prevented that way. And when Fogcrawler would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, shuffle it into its owner's library. So this doesn't necessarily go away even if you destroy it. If you exile it, that's something else, but this has a potential to come back through loot activations or the amount of card draw that this deck offers as well. So an awesome include here. And here we have what is the absolute best finisher in this deck. One of the very nice rare cards I got from the Scourge box. It is Ancient Ooze, which is an XX Ooze for 5 and 2 green. It says that its power and toughness are equal to the total converted mana cost of creatures you control. Like I said, I've had this become a 42/42 once, which is awesome. That's my personal best so far, and I know it's possible to go even crazier with this. So with all the other creatures giving stuff trample and vigilance and whatever, this becomes such a crazy card to swing out with. And then we have one of the cutest creatures ever printed in Magic. It is of course Poison Dart Frog. For 1 and 1 green, you get a 1/1 with reach that can tap for any color. You can also pay 2 to give it Death Touch until end of turn. Then we have Annoyed Altisaur for 5 and 2 green. You get a 6/5 reach trample dinosaur with Cascade. The Cascade will not trigger from loot, as loot doesn't allow you to cast what you find, but if you have this in your hand, you do get to Cascade, and from such a high mana cost, that is awesome. And here we have that elf I talked about. That is pretty much Gaia's Cradle. It is Circle of Dream Druids. For 3 green, you get a 2/1 elf that allows you to add 1 green for each creature you control, so it does the exact same. Next up is Scoot Swarm, an all-star landfall creature. For 2 and 1 green, you get a 1/1 insect that says landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 green insect creature token. If you control 6 or more lands, create a token that's a copy of Scoot Swarm instead. So there's a high likelihood that you will get to the point where you create multiple Scoot Swarms, and then there's another land coming in, and those 2 Scoot Swarms will multiply, and then those 4 will multiply, and over and over and over, and you will have a massive army of insects to use as chump blockers, or to potentially just swing out and take everyone out with a swarm of Scoots. Then we have Fanatic of Ronas, which is a very strong mana dork. For 1 and 1 green, you get a 1/4 Snake Druid that can tap for 1 green, but it has Ferocious. If you have a creature with power 4 or greater, this taps for 4 green as well. If it dies, you can pay 4 green to exile it from your graveyard and create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 4/4 black zombie Snake Druid. Then we have Yorvo, Lord of Garenbrig. For 3 green, you get a 0/0 giant noble that says that when it enters with 4+1 counters on it. Great for Kodama again. But it also says that whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1 counter on Yorvo. Then if that creature's power is greater than Yorvo's power, put another +1 counter on Yorvo. So Yorvo will get out of hand pretty quickly, even if the creatures aren't stronger than him, just because he gets so many +1 counters. Then we have not really a mana dork, but more of a mana bully. It is Elvish Aberration, which is a 5 and 1 green 4/5 elf mutant that taps for 3 green. It also has Forest Cycling too, but I think this is way better to actually get down. Even if you can get it from your hand, you get 3 mana back on the next turn for it. So definitely a auto include in this. And I open it myself, so I'm very glad to have a deck it goes in. Here is a Marvin Murderous Mimic as well, which is kind of odd at first glance, but for 2 mana you get a 2/2 toy that has all activated abilities of creatures you control that don't have the same name as this creature. So if you cast this before you cast Loot and then you cast Loot, it will be as if you had a Loot with haste, because you can activate Marvin the same way you can activate Loot, or at a later turn you can activate Marvin and then activate Loot if you have enough mana to get 2 activations going, which is awesome. And I'm pretty sure you could use the key in here to untap Marvin and go again as well. So there's a lot of stuff you can do with Marvin in this deck. Then we have a giant creature, which is Giant Ankheg. For 6 and 2 green, you get a 8/8 insect with trample and ward 2. It also gives trample and ward 2 to other creatures you control. So this is a huge hit to get off of Loot. Kind of love this card. This is one of the cards that I had no idea I owned. It's from the Baldur's Gate set, and I didn't really find any use for it in anything else, but this is a huge piece in this deck. Literally, it's a giant. It's awesome. It's so powerful and gives so much protection and trample to all your massive creatures as well. So that's a auto include. And then we have a support creature in Owlbear Shepherd. For 2 and 1 green, you get a 1/4 Goblin Druid. If creatures you control have total power 8 or greater, you draw a card at the beginning of your end step. That will happen pretty much as soon as you get a activation out. So that is awesome in here. Then we have Vaultborn Tyrant. For 5 and 2 green, you get a 6/6 dinosaur with trample. Whenever Vaultborn Tyrant or another creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 3 life and you draw a card. Whenever it dies, if it's not a token, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's an artifact in addition to its other type. So this, even if it dies, it comes back and it will then trigger again. If you get other creatures out through Loot, that will trigger, giving you life gain and card draw, and not to mention that it is a 6/6 with trample in itself, so it's kind of a threat that way as well. Love this card, very happy to have opened this, because that set was, other than a few hits, very, very miserable to open. And then we have Finn the Fangbearer. For 1 and 1 green, you get a 1/3 human warrior with Death Touch that says that other creatures with Death Touch you control, when they deal damage to a player, that player gets 2 poison counters. So that is in here pretty much just to make some of those chump blockers we have in here that do have Death Touch a little bit more threatening if they need to be. And we have 3/3 Root Weaver. For 1 and 1 green, you get a 1/3 that taps for a mana of any color. And Leaf Glider. For 1 and 1 green, you get a 2/1 elf that taps for green. And we have Nightshade Dryad. For 1 and 1 green, you get a 1/2 Dryad that taps for a colorless or 1 mana of any one color. It also has Death Touch, like I mentioned. Then we have Galta Primal Hunger. For 10 and 2 green, you get a 12/12 dinosaur. And that looks very steep, but this spell costs X less to cast, where X is the total power of other creatures you control. It also has trample. With this deck, if you've been somewhat lucky, this will just cost you 2 green to cast from your hand, but it's also such a great hit to get from Loot abilities as well. If you get this as your first creature, you're instantly a super scary threat on the board and kind of lucked out, I'll be honest. And then we have one of my favorite cards in this deck. It is Titanic Bullvox, which is one of the foils I opened from Scourge. I love the retro foil, and I'm so happy to have a deck that this goes into. It's 6 and 2 green for a 7/4 beast with trample. It just also has morph. I'm not even going to mention what morph does, because this is a creature that if it's in my hand, I do want to cast this to show off how cool it is right away. I don't want to wait for the flip up cost and whatever, and flipping this off of loot is so cool as well. We have Ankle Biter, which is another chump blocker with Death Touch. It's a 1/1 snake. And then we have Mossborn Hydra for 2 and 1 green. You get a 0/0 Hydra with trample. This creature enters the battlefield with +1/+1 counter on it, and it has landfall. Whenever a land enters, double the number of +1 counters on this creature. Then we have Kolvori, God of Kinship for 2 and 2 green. You get a 2/4 legendary god. This is a semi-backup plan if loot is not able to do its thing. It's based on legendaries though, but it says as long as you control 3 or more legendary creatures, Kolvori gets +4/+2 and has vigilance. And you can also pay 1 and 1 green to tap Kolvori and look at the top 6 cards of your library and reveal a legendary card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So this is very much a backup plan. Then we have Deadly Recluse. It's another chump blocker with Death Touch. This one also has reach. It's a 1/2 spider for 1 and 1 green. Then we have a great support creature is Hulking Raptor for 2 and 2 green. You get a 5/3 dinosaur with ward 2 that says at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, add 2 green. And then we have the prettiest Solemn Simulacrum that I have. Very stoked to have a deck to put this in, where it makes a lot more sense than some of the other decks because of the landfall stuff. Solemn Simulacrum is a 4-drop 2/2 artifact creature golem that says that when it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card and put that onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. When it dies, you may draw a card. So this is a creature I'm very happy with as a blocker, because if it dies, that gives me benefits as well. And then we have Surak Elusive Hunter, which I got from the sample pack of my Tarkir precon. For 2 and 1 green, you get a legendary human warrior, a 4/3 with trample that says it cannot be countered. And whenever a creature you control or a creature spell you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, draw a card. So this is protection and kind of like deterring people from targeting your stuff. Considering how much creature stuff we're doing, this makes a lot of sense in here. And then we have one of the earlier commanders for this deck, like we've talked about before, Kona Rescue Beastie for 3 and 1 green. You get a 4/3 Beast Survivor with Survival. At the beginning of your second main phase, if Kona is tapped, you may put a permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. This is good in its own way, where it doesn't look for creatures necessarily. You can put artifacts down, you can put enchantments, etc. It's not exactly what I wanted for a commander, but it's very good in the deck in the 99, so that's why it's in here. Same kind of goes for Questing Beast, which is a 2 and 2 green 4/4 beast with vigilance, death touch, and haste. It also says that it cannot be blocked by creature with power 2 or less, and combat damage that would be dealt by creatures you control cannot be prevented. Whenever Questing Beast deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to target planeswalker that player controls. So that's great. The last ability is a little bit situational. I don't play that many people playing planeswalkers, but if they do, I don't have to target the planeswalker. I can target the player instead and hope that that damage goes through. So I think there is a few things that I would like to change with this deck going forward, like some cards I would like to add, but I will talk about how I will go about doing that, and I think we should just jump right into that. So I'll see you in a second. Now that you've looked at the deck, you've seen the cards that are in the deck, you've seen kind of the philosophy behind it through the creatures that are being played in the deck. I talked a bit about how I opened a lot of the cards myself, and I finally have a home for the cards, which feels so good because these are good cards in certain synergies, and this kind of fits all of them in a flexible way, I guess. I think this was a great exercise in deck building as well, because like I said, I've kind of ignored mono green for a long time. I've kind of ignored green as a whole for a long time. Since this used to be such a core part of who I was as a Magic player when I started, it is great to have a deck that I could time travel back to younger me and give them this deck and be like, you're gonna love this because I know what you're like. That makes me happy. And if you like this kind of video, make sure to leave a like and let me know in the comments what you would like to see changed if you were to build this deck? I don't know. There is a few things that I would change with this deck. I have played it a few times now, and one thing I've noticed is that there is a weakness against flyers in this deck. I've also noticed a few times in early games where I don't have enough mana to get a loot activation out, or I'm attacked with multiple attackers while only having one big creature out. That combat damage can be kind of problematic in the beginning of the game, so getting effects like Fog out, I know there's like Call of the Terrasque or something is another card that would help me. Stuff to basically protect me if I'm like being overloaded with attackers against me. The way I would go about upgrading this deck is definitely not ordering online and stuff. I would probably rather have it be a deck that when I'm in a card shop and I see a card that goes into this deck perfectly, I'm like, great, that's an upgrade, I'll buy that card, and that way it becomes kind of like a treasure hunt, which is a thing I do with my Goblin deck as well. That's a deck that I've stopped ordering for. I'm only upgrading if I open a card or if I find a card. It makes it a lot more fun, and it makes the deck evolve a lot more naturally. It also scales a lot more naturally than just min-maxing a deck through EDH, Rec, and Scryfall and all of that. So all in all, super happy with the deck. It plays real good in the bracket it's in. It's not a turbo deck, it's not a competitive deck in any way, and that's exactly what it's trying to avoid to be. And so I'm happy with it. I love it. And if you like this video, like I said, leave a like. Let me know in the comments what you don't like about the deck and how different you would build it, and what you would build if you went to do this project. Like, make a deck for you as you got into Magic. What deck would you build for younger you? And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!